What is going on, guys? This is Miasin. So not too long ago, I made a video on transaction rollback and how much of an impact this card would have in the TCG once we'll get it, especially if there is no ban list, because with Beatrice you can easily abuse this card. But there is another card that's very similar that's also played in the exact same deck, which is Labyrinth, and that card is Rumpel Teufel. Thank you to my Germans always correcting me in the comment section, telling me that I'm pronouncing this card completely wrong. But I think I've got it now. So basically, just like transaction rollback, this is the kind of card that you can use twice, so on the field and in the graveyard, which means that, in other words, it is really good to discard off of your furniture monsters. And both effects are really good, unlike transaction rollback, which is only really good in the graveyard. So Rumpel Teufel, even if you hard draw it and you don't have the ability to discard it, it's still fantastic. So the first effect on the field, you declare one monster card name at activation, so it's not on resolution. Neither player can special summon monsters with that original name for the rest of the turn except from the graveyard. And then in the graveyard you can banish it and declare one monster card name. Neither player can activate the effect of monsters on the field with that original name for the rest of the turn. And just like transaction rollback, you can only use one effect per turn and only once that turn. So this card is the kind of card that kind of rewards you for understanding your opponent's deck really well and knowing exactly what to declare. I shouldn't say that, but unfortunately it's the kind of card that does reward you for scouting your opponent and actually knowing what they're playing, because in case they randomly go like Lightning Storm or Duster first, and then you can chain this and call the right card, it's gonna have a huge impact. But obviously this is way more realistic once you get to top cut, but in the earlier rounds it's just the kind of card that might do nothing, like you're gonna declare like a random card, or you might call something generic like a Zeus or something, or an SP Little Knight, or whatever else that might actually beat your board. But once you know what your opponent's deck is, you can start calling the cards that actually hurt, even though it's not supposed to be like an extremely powerful card because it's so flexible, it does something on the field and in the grave. Sometimes it can actually be the most powerful card that you could ask for. So for example, if you can declare the name of Turbulence and prevent it from being summoned or using its effect on the field, it can be like so much better than a bunch of other cards that usually you would want to have like in almost every matchup. Yeah, calling Rescue's Turbulence or like any one specific card that just you need to play in order to, have a chance in Yu-Gi-Oh! So for example, if your opponent goes like normal summon Snake Eye Ash, you don't know what your opponent's deck is, and then searches the Populace and then go Populace effect, you can chain the Rumpel Teufel and then declare the Populace so that it is still summoned, but it's not going to be triggering its effect. Well, actually, that's the effect in the graveyard, but on the field, then the Populace wouldn't even be able to summon itself, and then your opponent is left with like a useless Snake Eye Ash, which obviously doesn't do too much, so you can really take advantage of that and also call the cards at the perfect timing. And this card basically beats anything that is trying to special summon, honestly, and especially if you don't really have the ability to summon from the graveyard. So against shifter decks, this card is really good. And honestly, I want to say this card is kind of comparable in a way to Ghost Reaper in certain regards, because you can shut down a monster from being summoned entirely, which is like a temporary like Ghost Reaper when you think about it. So if you declare something like Isolde, either the Isolde won't be able to trigger any of its effects, regardless of like if it's this one or like the next one that you summon, like if you have the ability to summon a second Isolde. So sometimes it's better than having like a Veiler or Imperm. The ability to also prevent monster effects from being activated, I have to specify that it affects the players, not the monster itself, because the wording is neither player can activate the effect of monsters on the field with that original name for the rest of the turn. That's the graveyard effect. So if you're calling something like Expurely Noir with the grave effect of Rumpel Teufel, your opponent itself, like not the card, your opponent will not be able to activate the effect of Expurely Noir, regardless of the amount of materials. You can actually get rid of the threat that Expurely Noir is applying against you just by going Foolish Burial Goods, send that, and then immediately use the graveyard effect because it's obviously a trap card, so by definition it is spell speed 2. Meaning that even if your opponent has the quick effect of Expurely Noir, it's not gonna matter. So yeah, Foolish Goods can actually break boards against Purely now. So yeah, you're gonna have to really take that into consideration, but obviously there's other ways of getting Rumpel Teufel in the graveyard. You can either hard draw it and then discard it, or you can Foolish it with Red Lotus, King, Flame Crime. Didn't even know the actual full name, I just call it Red Lotus, but this card is really good in the Resonator deck. Obviously it's a level 3 monster that summons itself, that is, you can search with the Soul Resonator, if I recall correctly. And it allows it to be a one-card combo, and you can also Foolish a normal trap card when it is sent as a synchro material. Rumpel Teufel being one of the best ones that you can send, again, especially if you know what your opponent's deck is. And the Tearlament's deck, if it can mill a lot, then eventually it might be able to mill Rumpel Teufel. Again, it can fix a lot of your issues. If you're just scared of like any one monster, you're always going to be able to use Rumpel Teufel against your opponent and also basically just shut down a bunch of plays. Again, it depends on if you're using the on-field effect or the graveyard effect, but the on-field effect is particularly good against Unchained. If they go like Aruha effect, destroy your monster, their trap card, you chain Rumpelteufel, and that just prevents the Aruha from being used, while being summoned, and that would still destroy the targeted card, but it wouldn't summon the Aruha. Same thing with the Sharvara. You could also use the graveyard effect to like call the Unchained Soul Lord of Yama or whatever else that might be annoying. Or the Unchained Abomination, again, depends on their hand. Against the Silent Forcer deck, they're always going through the exact same cards, and that's actually another topic that I wanted to cover. Against any kind of deck that always summons the exact same kind of monsters, Rumpelteufel does so much because their whole strategy basically does nothing without that one monster. So Silent Forcer without Skull Guardian, it doesn't really play the game. Obviously, again, they can still special summon from the graveyard with the monster that you declare the name, so watch out. Don't call something like Novox because they can still use its effect in order to summon it back and then get a continuous spell or trap card. But Skull Guardian is just insane to call here. They can't ritual summon from the graveyard whatsoever. And against Mathmech, if you call Mathmech Circular, it's absolutely filthy. You gotta do it before your opponent can even use the effect of Circular because otherwise he's still going to be able to dump that Sigma for cost. So you might want to do it preemptively or whenever your opponent searches it with, I don't know, Small World or Silent Mining. And then you can make your opponent lose not only a lot of resources, but also momentum. Against the Branded Chimera deck, I want to say Rumpelteufel is kind of filthy because you can call Big Wing Baphomet, and then the Mirror Swords Knight has to summon something that just does nothing. So it's actually kind of big because, again, without this card, yeah, you're missing out on 2 searches, and the Gazelle only gets 1 search. It's way less good. Again, this is lingering. It doesn't just affect anything like that's currently on the field. It's like anything that your opponent would do for the rest of the turn. Well, technically, it affects both players, but it's always going to be way more one-sided. And against the Far King deck, you can call Garunix, and if you use it against the in-hand effect, then it's just absolutely insane. Like, without the Garunix, your opponent also isn't playing the game whatsoever. So yeah, against the best deck, which is Rescue Ace, arguably, Rescue Ace Turbulence loses out really hard to Rumpelteufel. The second best deck in a way, at least for next format, Garunix, that also loses very hard. And then some other pretty good decks like Unchained or whatever, like Cyber's decks in general, but Mathmech Circular especially because it's at 1 and you're always trying to get access to it. That loses hard. The Branded Chimera deck, Silent Forcer. I can't really think of like anything that doesn't lose to Rumpelteufel except for decks that just play a bunch of completely different cards like Tear Elements, for example. Yeah, you can still call stuff from the extra deck, by the way. It's not like Ghost Reaper where you have to you can only call cards in the extra deck and you also have to play the card yourself. Rumpelteufel, as long as you know the name of a card, you're good to go. And also, you don't even really need to know the name, as long as both players agree on what monster card is being called. And even against decks that don't even play that many monsters, like against Runic-based strategies, you can call Hugin, and that's still good enough. Like, it's actually crazy. Like, if you have the graveyard effect of Rumpelteufel and your opponent uses a Runic spell in order to summon the Hugin, you can just chain the Rumpelteufel called the Hugin, and even if your opponent chains like another one and summons the Hugin, it doesn't do anything because the Hugin won't be able to activate its effect to search the fountain, and therefore your opponent's deck does absolutely less than nothing. So yeah, I really like Rumpelteufel. I do believe that it is extremely underestimated. It's not only good in Labyrinth, it could definitely be played in other decks. Any kind of milling strategy. Lightsworn eventually because we just got the new support and it's so disgusting. I can't wait to test with it, but yeah, a lot of decks, like I said, can abuse this card and I can't wait to see it in action. But yeah, that's pretty much all I had for you guys for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know your thoughts about this insane trap card in the comment section below. Do you think it's only going to see much play in Labyrinth or in other decks? I want to hear your thoughts, and that's it for this video. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.